Be right back. Let's talk about Skynet. You think that's a fictional construct? It's looking more and more real every day that we move along. And I tweeted about this yesterday. And I think maybe the person who'll be running it will be Elon Musk running Skynet. Before we get to the satellites and his connections to the military-industrial complex that are now being bragged about, you can see the article on the Drudge Report. This was kind of interesting. I saw this this week. Tesla reports in California only 12.2 miles of autonomous mode testing in all of 2019. So last year, they took one trip that was just over 12 miles long. Because, you see, California requires, if you're going to be operating and testing self-driving cars, as they call them. No, we have self-driving cars now. Let's call these robot-controlled cars, centrally controlled cars, to take away your liberty of movement. Centralized control of transportation using the car because the buses and the subways and the trams are such a pain in the behind that nobody wants to use these garbage pieces, and they don't want to be packed like sardines into these forms of quote-unquote public transportation, as we see things like the coronavirus coming out. You may not want to go to the government schools, and you may not want to use the government transportation, those little tin cans that they move you around in, coop you up in, as you see the coronavirus. This could really be the silver lining on all this stuff. But nevertheless, companies who are working on these kinds of autonomous cars, they call them. No. Autonomous is what you are now. They want to make you dependent. But they're required, these so-called cars, are required to give the state of California regular reports on how many miles they drove and how many disengagements from autonomous mode they had. In other words, the number of times that a human has to intervene because these cars fail. Tesla reported for all of 2019, only one trip, 12.2 miles and no disengagements. By contrast, Waymo, which is Google's company, reported nearly 1.5 million miles. So 1.5 million miles versus 12 for Tesla. Another company called Cruise claimed more than 830,000 miles for 2019. Isn't that interesting? And Car and Driver said that's interesting since Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla, has said that he has used Tesla full self-driving during the past year. Oh, gee, maybe he didn't report it. I don't think there's going to be any penalties for that, do you? I mean, he can do things on Twitter. The SEC gives him a slap on the hand. Anybody else does that, they would have taken all their money and put him in jail. They would have accused them of something like, they did Martha Stewart. Except Martha Stewart didn't go to jail for insider trading. She went to jail for supposedly lying to the FBI, because that's what they get everybody on, right? Don't talk to them. Hint. Anyway, the NTSB chairman has something to say about Tesla. As motor, see this Car and Driver on one, Motor Trends the other. These are establishment auto press people, typically cheering along all of the different car companies. They typically never say anything negative about any of these car companies because they want to be given access to the cars to review. So even when the thing's a real stinker, they try to couch it and say, well, I liked the radio knobs. That was really cool. The National Transportation Safety Board's chairman, Robert Sumwalt, put Tesla on notice in his opening statement during an open session Monday in Mountain Valley, California, about the crash of a Tesla Model X that resulted in the death of the driver, Walter Wang. This is the guy who worked for Apple. He was the Apple engineer. It turns out they found out that at the time of the crash, he was otherwise occupied. He believed, what Elon Musk was telling him about, autonomous autopilot, right? Tesla autopilot, put it on autopilot. You keep using that word. I do not think you know what it means. Actually, I think Elon Musk knows exactly what his autopilot is capable of. I think the people who sit there playing video games and wind up dying, I think they don't know what it means. Yeah, he was playing video games with his iPhone, this Apple engineer. But Elon Musk was playing semantic games that cost him his life. And he said the National Transportation Safety Board chairman said that he believes that Tesla isn't doing enough to inform customers of its autopilot driver assistance feature limitations. He said, quote, "You can't buy a self-driving car today. We're not there yet." And then he noted how Tesla's autopilot is merely a level 2 autonomous driving system. A level 2 autonomous driving system requires driver supervision at all times. Now, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has outlined the 6 levels of automated driving. Level 4 vehicles are capable of full automation in certain driving instances. But level 5 is when it is capable of full automation in all instances. And we don't have anything anywhere close to that now. Thank God we don't have anything like that, because they would be forcing us to get it. When you look at the way that they bend the rules for Elon, even though the National Transportation Safety Board chairman has these harsh words to say about Elon Musk. No harsh words to say about him from the Securities and Exchange Commission for how he was just joking and cost a lot of people a lot of money. But, of course, they don't ever do anything to him. And here's why, folks. The Air Force and SpaceX, that other company that Elon Musk has, are teaming up for a massive live fire exercise. I tweeted out this morning, I said, you really need to understand, when we talk about the military-industrial complex today, more specifically, we're talking about the military Silicon Valley complex. That's really what it is. Because these companies in Silicon Valley are the ones who are teaming up with DARPA and the military. As I said, you think you like Tesla's autonomous cars? Well, that began as a DARPA project. Self-driving cars, one of the earliest projects that they put out there, and said, we got a prize here if you can get a car to navigate this based on just controls that it has internally without a human driver. And now they've gone on to work on killer robots and other things like that. And so I said, you're going to love autonomous killer robots. You're going to love the 5G panopticon Skynet that's being built by Elon Musk with 20,000 satellites. See, this is the reason why he's given a pass. Because he's building the infrastructure of a technocratic tyranny for these people. And so they grease the skids for him with everything. He's already doing live fire. But as worrisome as the autonomous killer robots that DARPA and Elon Musk want to dominate you with, it's also the 5G that I think is very, very frightening. The health effects, not just the control and the lack of privacy that we see there. When I've talked many times to Hugo de Garis about the Starlink wars, and he talks about how, AI is a very dangerous technology, and he should know because he's worked on it. That was his specialty for many years. And he said he believes that it's going to become fully cognizant. I don't share that belief, but I do share his concern about what the technocratic elite will do with it. He believes that as people start to get concerned about AI and its dominance on us, that we will demand some controls on these technocratic elites like Elon Musk. And then he posited in his book, The Starlink War, he believed that they're not going to accept those restraints on their technocracy. And so they are going to remove themselves from the earth, as we've already seen depicted in fiction, as we've already heard Jeff Bezos, that's his fantasy since he was in college, to get to the Lagrange libration points and be able to, live off planet. You saw it depicted in the movie Elysium. So they will set up these places where they can live, and they will conduct war on us using their killer robots and their drones and so forth. He calls that the Starlink War. He calls these people the Cosmos because he says, hey, they're going to take to space, and then they're going to come after those of us on Earth, the Terrans. And he says it will result in gigadeath. And they may be able to kill us soft kill with just the 20,000 satellites beaming 5G that Elon Musk has already been given permission to put up. If you go back and you look at how much money is involved in SpaceX and this satellite issue, I mean, just taking a look at the going back to 2018, one website calculated how much the Super Heavy Starship would make deploying the Starlink satellite network. This is a network Elon Musk has been given approval of putting up 20,000 satellites. And he's going to do that. They call that the Starlink network, satellite network. It'll make it $1 to $2 billion cheaper to launch than with the Falcon 9s. And the conclusion is if Starlink succeeds, then SpaceX revenue will be more than double NASA's budget. More than double NASA's budget. So there's a lot of money involved in this. And the reason that they look the other way is because of his involvement with the military-industrial complex, because now he is the industrial part of the military-industrial complex. SpaceX's fleet of 20,000 5G satellites, as one activist writes, will alter the electromagnetic environment of our planet and will be an immediate threat of extinction to all life on Earth. Think about that. The Starlink satellites will be located in the lowest level of the magnetosphere, called the ionosphere. The ionosphere will be exposed to the full power of the satellite radiation instead of just a tiny fraction of the energy that goes through the power lines that are located on the ground. So you're going to put it actually in the ionosphere. What could possibly go wrong? And why would we be concerned about beaming 5G radiation to all of us here on Earth, right? I'm concerned about the clusters of antennas, and we have seen how clusters of just ordinary cell phones have affected people. But when we start doing this with 5Gs, they're going to put this like every 50 feet in the cities because it has to be line of sight. And once it's line of sight, understand they're going to be multiplexing these. Multiple antennas will be multiplexed to focus on you, all of them focused on you. And then they will change their focus to somebody else for a moment and then back to you again. What could possibly go wrong with that kind of energy? I mean, we go back and we look at all the warnings that have been given to us by Alan Fry from the early days, the Fry effect, where you can actually hear electromagnetic radiation. You hear it as clicks. Remember all the talk about what happened to people in Cuba and in China and so forth? It's like, you know, the problem that they had. They said, don't worry, there's nothing to that at all. Well, that was a Fry effect. We've had the Fry effect very well documented by Alan Fry. He was doing research for the naval. The Navy had given him, I forget the exact title of the organization that he was in, but he's being funded by the Navy. And for years, he documented the biological effects of electromagnetic radiation. And the frequencies are different with this, and the strengths are going to be different, but they're still very, very high. As a matter of fact, they will be higher once you combine all these different antennas at various points in time. And one of the experiments that he did was he injected dye into the bloodstream. And, you know, we have a thing called the brain-blood barrier, right? And typically it does the things in the blood, and the blood itself do not pass between that blood-brain barrier, except when you expose the body to electromagnetic radiation. At that point, you can have toxins, bacteria, as well as virus pass through that blood-brain barrier. And he did it, just, you know, very simple experiment with dye. So we shouldn't be worried about that, right? Let's play video clip number 5, talking about 5G radiation.
Millions, maybe billions of us constantly call, text, click, take pictures, and play on our cell phones. Even the top cellular radiation researchers from around the world have a hard time untethering. But they gathered recently in North Carolina to talk about cell phone concerns and whether they really do increase our chances of developing cancer. The panel voted that the results from years of testing on mice and rats were more significant than originally thought. They say they found clear evidence that phone radiation caused tumors in the hearts of rats.
We've known about this for decades. This is CBS
in
now.
In humans, it's seen in the vestibular nerve in the ear, the acoustic nerve. We found it in the heart, although our animals were exposed in their whole body condition.
While a given animal is not making a cell phone call, they are, throughout their short 2-year lifetime, getting the same exposure that we would expect people to get in their 70-plus years of life.
Activists are now calling for more protections, citing separate studies from France and Italy.
Many brain tumor lawsuits going on right now that are waiting for a study like this to prove that people's brain cell phone radiation.
And there are new concerns on the horizon. 5G is about to debut a stronger system of broadband. Some activists say the government has a responsibility to increase regulations.
And I think it's also a responsibility of the ones making up the phones to make them as safe as possible. And I'm sure they can do better than what we actually have.
Yeah, we already have some jurisdictions like Brussels where they said this, the radiation, they're going to tell you that it's different. They're going to tell you that it's not as strong. No, they're lying to you about that. You have to look at this and you have to ask, why are they allowing this to move forward? Well, it's the same reason they allowed Monsanto for many years to sell glyphosate and still do. It's why they allowed the opioid epidemic to go on for years and years. It's about money. The same reason they're not concerned at all about the effects of autonomous cars killing people. They're not concerned about rigging the stock market with tweets. And they're not concerned about regulating any of this stuff. It's about money and it's about power. And that's what the military-industrial complex, the military Silicon Valley complex is all about. And so you have to take make efforts to protect yourself and your family. And again, when we look at this, when we look at the coronavirus, and we're going to have Gerald Celente joining us in the next segment, we're going to talk about the economic effects, because there is no question about that. The economic effects have already landed. The supply chain effects are already percolating in terms of the economy. But again, if you want to protect yourself not only from disease by building up your immune system and making sure you're in as good a possible health as you can be and your family, take a look at the supplements that we have at InfoWarsStore.com, but especially you want to be able to prepare so that you don't get taken out in, if the food disappears off the shelf or the medicine disappears off the shelf, you want to make sure that you have prepped in advance products to protect yourself, your family, to keep you healthy and to keep you out of the clutches of the FEMA camps. So right now, if you want to make sure that you've got storable food, we still have storable food. It's going to take now up to 3 weeks. The delivery times are getting longer, but we can get that to you within 3 weeks. It's getting delayed with each passing minute, so you need to put in your order as soon as possible. Other suppliers aren't able to ship at all. We still have supply, even though it's getting longer. And other suppliers have been putting in as much as a 10% increase on their emergency storable food. We've been able to hold the price where it was without an increase, but that's not going to last forever. Take a look at InfoWarsStore.com. Storable food. Make sure you've got a clean gravity feed water filter, and make sure you have other products to protect your family's health. InfoWarsStore.com. We'll be right back with Gerald Celente. Stay with us. Welcome back. Joining us now is Gerald Celente, and I wanted to get Gerald on to talk about what's going on economically, because as we've seen the lockdown in China, based on the coronavirus, shutdown of factories and everything. Of course, China is at the center of the supply lines for many, many things. I pointed that out last week, earlier than that. And we saw the stock market react to that this week. And Gerald has been warning us about how overextended China is, how it was an inflated economy that was looking for a pin to puncture it. So I wanted to get Gerald on to talk about this. And again, you can find Gerald at trendsresearch.com. That's where you can find Trends Journal. You can get a sample of Trends Journal. You can also find Gerald on Twitter at Gerald Celente. And Gerald is joining us now, and I think you're having a little bit of computer problems, so we've got you on audio. But we do have you on audio. Thanks for joining us, Gerald.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about what's going on with China. We got this thing is looking pretty crazy from an economic standpoint at the very least, isn't it?
From an economic standpoint, it is, but, the numbers to me just don't add up. And they're tiny. And you read the headline, one expected carnivorous virus in the United States, Dow futures down 400 points.
Yeah. Well, they were looking for an excuse to puncture it, weren't they? Don't you think?
Well, I don't think so. I started looking back at some of the things that was coming out before this happened. Wealthy investors see nothing that will stop this relentless bull market. January 19th. One after another, where they were looking, that this thing was going to keep going, the markets. But then you start going back, and as you well know, on your show, it has to be at least 8 months ago.
Oh, yeah, I would say it was even longer than that. You talked about how this is a house of cards. Yeah.
Right. But I'm saying I forecast the greatest depression. And I believe that it's happening now. And you go back and you look here, January 17th. This isn't ancient history. IMF boss says global economy risks return of Great Depression. This is January 17th. The head of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. So it's one, they were warning this. IMF says the outlook for global economy remains sluggish as its cut forecast, January 20th. And then you go back to just a day or two before it, on January 18th, Financial Times, big story, U.S. stocks within reach of biggest bull run in history. So what I'm saying is that the slowdown was coming. Everybody that listens to InfoWars, that subscribes to our magazine, knows the whole thing is nothing but one big Ponzi scheme. They've been dumping in all this cheap money, backed by nothing and printed on nothing. The repo markets, that's what turned the whole thing around in September. They pumped in some $7 trillion since September. So it was bound to collapse. And to me, and again, I'm being criticized for it, but I don't care, that I'm saying the numbers for this coronavirus don't really show me that it's that serious. And again, the Chinese are lying about the numbers. Fine. The Chinese are lying about the numbers. How many people died in Italy? 4, 5, 12?
Yeah, I think last I saw it was 6, but that was a couple of days ago.
Right.
And we had, I reported earlier today, The Lancet, which is the UK's equivalent of the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA. In the UK, they call it The Lancet. And they tested a couple dozen people. 11 of them had died, and they said nobody had the coronavirus. They thought they had the coronavirus, but it turns out that none of them did, even though some of them had double pneumonia in both lungs, and some of them had died. They were elderly or young or whatever, or other issues. They said nobody had the coronavirus. The thing that's caused this reaction in the stock market is the fact that we were told over the weekend that it had exploded, the number of cases had exploded in Italy, in South Korea, and in Iran. So you got, Europe and Asia and the Middle East, and the cases are exploding, and so everybody is reacting to this. And yet the issue is, and this is what I'm wondering, and I've been wondering about this, what's your take on what's going on in China? Because, as we look at this and the numbers that China is putting out, which seem to be very carefully fictionalized, because it holds at a very steady 2.1% casualties. And so nobody believes the numbers. They don't believe, that it's going to be exactly 2.1% day after day, which is less than the typical flu. But why, if it has those kinds of numbers that they've been putting out, why would they enact this massive draconian shutdown of everything in the country and shut down all their industry? Why would they do that? Well, that's what I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't. But to me, the draconian shutdown is a proof of how the government can take control of an entire population of 1.4 billion people like that. And they're doing it everywhere.
Look at what Mao did with his Cultural Revolution. He starved 50 million people to death, There was no virus involved in that. That was just communist central planning that killed all those people.
But they're doing it in other countries, too. You have these politicians that are closing down cities, areas. They're deciding. Again, the numbers to me add up to nothing. What do we got? Over almost 3,000 dead. Let's suppose the number is real from China, 3,000 dead. I'm not good at math, but 3,000 dead out of a population of 1.4 billion, there's a lot of zeros before that number comes up. And then
even when you put it as a percentage,
and then you go to Italy. All right, let's just say 10 died. 10 died, and by the way, just reading the reports coming out, mostly are elderly and chronically ill.
Yeah.
And that's a population of 60 million. Okay, 12 died and 60 million. Oh, and we have a case in America of coronavirus. What do you got? 327 million people, and you got how many people died yesterday in car accidents?
Yeah, exactly.
So what I'm saying,
that's what I've said from the beginning. The thing that I'm most concerned about is the quarantine that's going to be enacted by the government. If they say, well, this is dangerous, and we're going to have to lock you up, because that's the first thing we saw in China. We saw, the people in military uniforms with their handheld, touchless thermometers saying, no, shine this on you in the car. No, you're coming with us. That's the thing that concerns me. And the quarantine and the vaccine that could follow it up that isn't tested. Those are the two things that really worry me.
I think those are two things you should be very worried about. And I'm worried about them as well. And look, I was in Nepal last year, just around Christmas time before that. And anyway, everybody walks around with these masks on. The air is so filthy, And what I'm saying is that entire population, you see it over and over again, how people get used to being downgraded, how they lower their standard of lives because they're told to. And so I could imagine in America the same kind of thing going on where people are walking around with all of this gear on to protect them from a virus. Hey, how about stop eating all that crap that you're eating, and maybe you won't get as sick. Oh, what are the diabetes rates? When we were kids, there was no such thing as type 2 diabetes like there is now.
Yeah, because there was no such thing as high fructose corn syrup put in every kind of food that you can imagine. All right, when we come back, I want to talk about the economic effects of this, because when we look at the supply line, for whatever reason, if this is a conspiracy theory or if this is a real disease or whatever, for whatever reason, China has shut down all these different factories. We're going to take a look at the economic effects of that with Gerald. Welcome back. We're talking to Gerald Celente of trendsresearch.com. Of course, he publishes Trends Journal. You can find him on Twitter at Gerald Celente, and he has been pointing out how this is trending for quite some time, and now things are getting pretty bad, aren't they, Gerald, as we look at what's going on in China and what is a reality. Regardless of what's going on with the coronavirus, the shutdown in China has had a big effect, Gerald, on auto parts, for example. The Hyundai had that massive facility. They make 1.4 million cars a year. They had to shut it down because they couldn't get parts. You miss one part, you got to shut down your whole line. And several auto manufacturers who are reliant on that and also have manufacturing facilities in China, they've had to shut it down. They're losing $6 million a day, I reported earlier this week. And it looks like they're not going to be able to get this started back up in early March. And even if they were to do that, once they are given the green light to go back to work by the Chinese government, it's going to take weeks to get these lines back up. And it's not just that. It's also medicine and pharmaceutical industry, and even Procter & Gamble saying over 17,000 products they're going to start getting shortages on. So talk to us about the economic effects, Gerald. You talked about the real estate market for quite some time in China. The Chinese government is saying that, it's slightly up in terms of real estate prices. Like, oh, seriously? When you got at least one major developer offering 25% discount and there's no takers? Because nobody's got a job right now, right?
Yeah, no. Look, China was going through these problems before this happened. This is going to make a very bad situation much, much worse. And again, this might escalate the Greatest Depression. And the reason being, of course, is the equity market failing and all the other implications. And a big one to look at, David, oil prices. Look where they're at. Brent crude is now almost $50 a barrel. Go back to the beginning of the year, Brent crude was up to $70 a barrel. Now let's put more of this together. Hey, how about America's great allies? That the great beheaders in chief, the Saudis, I love those cats. Hey, where's the Me Too movement over there? How they doing? Anyway.
The cut and two movement is really what the head choppers out there.
Yeah. Anyway, they need they need oil at around $100 a barrel for their economy to break even, their budget to break even. They're halfway there.
Wow.
Then you have what's going on around the rest of the world with Iran, Venezuela, on and on and on. They, you know, when all else fails, they take you to war. You want to get those prices back up? We know how to do it.
Yeah.
I think these are the kind of things people should be looking at. And another very important factor to me, and again, you know the motto of the Trends Journal, think for yourself. Look at gold prices.
Yes.
How much are they up today? About $10 as we go, just before I got on the air? Gold should be up $30. Gold should be up $50. Gold should be up $100.
So why didn't it go up that much, in your opinion?
Because if this coronavirus was as scary with the implications as they're saying, gold prices would be skyrocketing. Because let's take the other look. How about that inverted curve yield on the Treasury? It's at an all-time low right now. So people are looking to put their money into anywhere because they're concerned about high risk. So gold prices, watch them very closely, because if you see gold spiking now, it hit the high of the beginning of the week around $1,672 an ounce. If gold spikes above $1,700 an ounce, kiss the global economy, kiss the equity markets goodbye. Because from there it's going to spike, I forecast, to 2,000 plus. Because gold is telling you, well, I don't mean you, I mean me,
right,
where the markets are. That's that Bronx talk. Hey, listen to me. The gold is telling us where we're going.
Yeah, and of course, it really has gone up in the last week or so. And you talked about watching it when it broke through that barrier of 1,400, and it broke through that and just kept going. And now it's retraced a little bit. But again, you know, when we look at this, I mean, what is the, when you look at, you believe that we're going to go in, and there's many indications that this has been going to happen for quite some time, looking at Chinese real estate and various other things like that. But now with this clamp down in China, and with this disruption to all these other industries around the globe, I mean, is there any way, in your opinion, that they can pull this out?
No, I don't believe they can. And I believe it's going to unravel, and it's going to make a very bad situation worse. But again, you know, here's the other deal. You're going to start seeing them all lower interest rates very dramatically. So that's going to happen as well. They're going to do everything they can to pump this market up.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the kind of things that we're looking at that are going to really make a very, very, very bad situation much, much worse.
Yeah, they're willing to do anything, as you pointed out, you know, trillions of dollars into that repo market. And most people don't. Repo market, you know, what is that? They haven't heard
What's
it.
What's a repo market?
Yeah, exactly. People used to say that about, you know, what is a secondary housing market? What's the securitization of mortgages and everything? You know, eventually you find out what it's about, but they keep inventing these tools to steal money and defraud people. And that's just, you know, another one of the things that's happening with this, the fact that they can put that much money in that short period of time. And so they're willing to do anything with that. So your take on all this is that I guess perhaps at this point we just kind of hunker down and prepare for the worst. Maybe invest in gold even. I know you don't give any investment advice, but
well, you know, we called the Gold Bull Run in our Trends Journal on June 6th of last year. Yeah. So gold prices are now over $300 higher from when we called the Gold Bull Run. Yeah. And you know me, I've been negative on gold before then. I said, no, it's not going to move until it breaks out certain points. And when it broke past the points, then we put the trend forecast out. David, this thing could unravel very quickly. The banksters may not be able to pull it off. They're going to do everything they can to keep shoving more cheap money in. The more cheap money they shove in, the stronger gold prices are going to go. This could trigger the Great Depression, the greatest depression, which I said wouldn't happen until 2021. This could escalate it because the governments, to me, are overreacting. The numbers don't warrant what they're doing. People are afraid to travel. I know somebody was they're going to go to Bali, and now they didn't go. I know other people are going to go to London, they didn't go. And that's people.
Well, it's a real concern because you look at what happened to these people on these cruise ships. I mean, you travel and you know, even if you're not worried about getting sick, you're worried about getting quarantined somewhere.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the issue. I mean, I don't want to get kidnapped.
So the implications are far-reaching. This could destroy the equity markets and the global economy if they continue to react the way they are.
Yeah, and I guess the center of all of this is, you know, the conspiracy theorist, I mean, looks at this and looks at the election in terms of this happening even earlier than you expected. This is going to have a big effect on the election, as President Trump and other people have pointed out, you know, because he's pinning his hopes for re-election seriously on the economy, as they always do. It's always about the economy and how people feel. And right now, people feel good about the economy. But this is going to be a lot of hurt coming through here with all of these various industries shutting down and people losing their jobs and perhaps even empty shelves. Because it's not just the finished materials. It's even the raw materials to make pharmaceuticals and medicines and, you know, household products coming from China.
And again, that's very important. And again, the numbers just came out today. Durable good orders are down in January before this happened. So a bad situation is going to become it's going to escalate. And again, what they're doing with all this fear that they're putting into the people, it's going to hurt the hospitality business. It's going to hurt the restaurant business. It's going to hurt travel. And so the implications, and as you pointed out, all of the other fallout from not getting enough product that they need for to build things, to make things, whether it's from
I mean, just in France, I mean, they're talking about the fact that, you know, hey, this is a big part of our economy. We're going to take about a 3.5% hit on GDP if this doesn't pull out of this, just because of the reduction in tourism. So it's all of these different industries, and it's happening all at once. And of course, you've been predicting that we had a house of cards and was going to have a major correction for quite some time. That's why I wanted to get you on today. Thank you, Gerald. And if you want to find out more where the trends are headed, go to trendsresearch.com. You can get a sample of Trends Journal. Follow Gerald Celente on Twitter at Gerald Celente. That's it for our broadcast today, folks. You can find me on Twitter at Libertarian. Oh, one more thing. Judicial tyranny